Hello and welcome to another episode of the DigiTeacher Digest. This week I'll be chatting to Colin Webster, who's Secretary General of MindSport South Africa, and we'll be talking about the role of eSports in the curriculum. If you think about the role of sports generally, then a key intervention was that of Thomas Arnold from Rugby School in the UK, who argued that team sports were absolutely vital in the development of character. And you can see this exemplified in books like Tom Brown's School Days. You can learn things on the playing fields that you can't learn in the classroom. Things like resilience, collaboration, teamwork, all of that. But what about esports? Can esports fulfill the same role? I'll be talking to Colin about that and other issues. Hello, Colin, and thank you for agreeing to this interview. It's nice to see you again. I haven't seen you face to face for a long time. And today we'll be talking about esports and it's what you see as its role in schools. So I want to start off just with a thought, and that is that especially I think amongst people of our generation, what we would have called video games has a very bad reputation, kind of seen as antisocial, teenagers alone in their bedrooms, getting up to all kinds of shenanigans, and it's probably very, very bad. So has that changed in recent years?
Well, I think certainly the generation before ours had even a worse opinion of video games. My father-in-law always used to consider it of being of the devil. I was probably more akin to, more accepting of esports because my son was so involved. But what you find is that there's still a certain hesitancy amongst school governing bodies and amongst the leadership of the schools, in terms of the principals. There's still a lot of hesitancy there. They don't really fully understand the value nor of what esports can actually deliver to the learner. So esports still has a long way to go at school level.
Yeah, and why do you think that is?
I think there's a number of factors. There's preconceived notions. A lot of the people involved in the leadership positions at schools have come through very traditional schools where rugby, cricket have played a very important part in, the status of the school and how the school sort of projects itself. I think a lot of people as well are very nervous about esports in that it's seeming to be very lethargic, promoting a certain degree of lethargy amongst learners in that, they do not seem to be active. But these are issues that can easily be identified and dealt with. You're looking at esports in schools where a lot of the learners actually tend to be very active physically in order to be at their best performance levels in esports. Also, esports in a way has the opportunity of being a very cheap alternative for the schools. Instead of rugby and cricket, you don't need to maintain these expensive fields which are only used for rugby and cricket. You can use a computer lab which is used for class as well as for esports.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Do you think it's because it's kind of perceived as an individual activity? So, I mean, for example, what's his name? Chris Froome complained that, his cycling wasn't taken as a sport when he went to school. And he had to do it, after school. He wasn't allowed to do it as a school sport. Perhaps because it was seen as an individual activity, not part of team sport.
I think it's a different problem altogether. When I was at school, I was a competitive swimmer, as you know. And all the competitive swimmers that trained with me had exactly the same problems with the schools which they attended. And that was that the schools liked to have everybody in their swimming pool at their swimming sessions, which were just not good enough, actually, for competitive swimming. So it is really a case of the schools like to be very much in-house. They like to actually control the sport. This and if you have a look at, for example, cycling or fencing and swimming, what the school offers is actually just not at the same level as what you will find at provincial and national level. So what we've done with Mind Sports South Africa is that we've actually incorporated the school clubs directly into the system. So what you do at school level is what you do at provincial and national level, to give the learner the opportunity, and of course the school the credit for, creating leaders in their field.
Yeah. And what benefit do you think it gives to students?
Well, there are many benefits. The starting from just being more aware of how computers work. I mean, quite frankly, this is the digital age, and it's very difficult to understand why schools don't want to get involved. But the advantages are exactly the same as any other sport. It teaches the learner discipline. It teaches the learner how to interact with their fellow team members. Because don't forget, eSports is not only an individual sport, there are team sport aspects to it as well. So, it still can, enhance the status of the school. And, some of the schools that have been long-time members of Mind Sports South Africa have actually reaped those benefits.
Yeah, I mean, certainly my brief career as a coach of eSports, coach being used very loosely, what I noticed is perhaps even more team strategizing, more team collaboration than in traditional sports.
Well, certainly, I'd agree with you there, because what you find is that all the learners, all the participants in eSports have their own ideas in terms of strategy and tactics. And it's a great way to see the youngsters actually also express themselves and to make sure that their own ideas get put forward. I mean, whereas if you look at the traditional sports of rugby and cricket, these are ideas that are actually thrust down from the top. Whereas in eSports, you have this ability where people can actually show their own initiative. And I think that is what's so important about schools, is that they actually have to encourage amongst the learners the ability to show much more initiative than what they do.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly was not able to pass on any strategies or anything. I couldn't even play the game. I just managed setting up the fixtures and then sitting back and letting the captain take over.
Yeah, and I mean, we're all in that position. And this is the thing, that I mean, so many of the youngsters that have come through eSports have gone on to much bigger things in their own work lives. It's not a case that they sit there and they harp on, I was a good rugby player in my day. They move on and they go into the IT field. And let's face it, that's the future. If you're not doing IT today, you're in very serious trouble in the next 20 years.
Yeah. And South Africa, I think, has quite a big schools league going, a big eSports league going. Are there any other countries which have similar leagues?
Yes, well, South Africa can pride itself on being the oldest school league. Of course, there's America, and that's a very commercial league as well. That's done at school level and at college level. Russia doesn't. It's only the more developed national federations that are actually able to pull it off. But there's still a lot of resistance, which I think over time will weaken as more and more younger people actually come to the fore in terms of leadership. But it's something that we try and show all the headmasters, all the educators, that this is the food chain. It has so many benefits for the youngsters because it puts them so much more in touch with the digital world. I mean, a good eSports player needs to understand the logarithms behind the game. And if they don't, they'll never really be truly great at the game. So, it's not surprising if you see past members of the Protea eSports team having their master's degrees, having their doctorates, having really become successful in the field of software engineering.
Yeah. And do you think that, where do you see it headed? Do you think it's going to grow? Will more and more schools join in the league? Will there be international leagues set up with schools?
Yes, in fact, it is growing at the moment. There's already talks going at the moment to have it included at the international schools league status. And then what you also have is that it will include many schools. What we find is many more educators who are becoming interested, in actually running school clubs, just to cater for the interests of their learners. I mean, it's important to note that all sport is actually just representative of society, and the interests of the people who actually participate. And what you're finding is that more and more people are buying in to this whole fourth industrial revolution of making sure that they are able to participate in this new digital world. So as the younger educators replace the older leadership, yes, I would be surprised, put it this way, if not every single school wasn't a participant.
And careers in esports? I mean, you were president of the International Esports Federation, and are you still on the board there?
Well, I'm on a commission at the moment.
Okay.
But what you've got to look at is that certainly overseas, the opportunity for careers in esports, it's just phenomenal how it's grown. You might remember Jason Batserfin from St. John's, who is now fully employed in the esports field in the UK. And this is the thing. While it is in South Africa, it's got socioeconomic problems in terms of creating these new industries. They are growing, and they are growing at a fairly rapid rate. And there are these opportunities for people who want to do it, but it's also the careers that already exist in terms of software engineering, in terms of writing the programs for the games. It's a huge industry, and it's got more than it's going to be the big employer in the future.
Is it a sport that you can carry on, as you grow older? I mean, it seems that the average player is of a very young age. But, is it something that people can continue playing competitively?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, it's very difficult for, an old tupi to compete against somebody who's young and who's got very fast reflexes, who has the time to dedicate himself or herself to the game, day in and day out. Because, basically, let's face it, when you're older, you have to hold a job, you've got your family responsibilities, and you've got many other demands in your life. But older people can maintain a standing within the competitive community. I mean, you've got Ovidiu Petrescu in Romania, who has been at the top of his game in FIFA as long as I can remember, since 2007. So, you know, you can do it if you've got the time and dedication to put to it. But even just as a recreational level, there are many older players now who are in their 40s who still play on the amateur circuits, and you know, get a lot of reward out of that. You don't have to always be, you know, the top dog. You know, so it is something that can keep you going. And in fact, look, there are people even into their 60s who play from time to time.
Okay, great. And I'm just wondering if, you know, certainly trying to run a club at the school where I teach, one of the big problems is that certainly for girls, there seems to be a limit of the amount of time that they are able to put in. I think boys seem to find more time for it. I don't know why that is, but there seems to be a limit, you know. Very much for girls, the homework and the schoolwork comes first. Whereas I think for boys, they're often prepared to kind of put that to one side, do the gaming, and then worry about the homework, often when it's way too late.
Well, that's an international problem. And I mean, if you have a look at the females who do very well on the female circuit, you find that they're all very well educated people. You have people who have got their honors, they've got their doctorates, and they do seem to put their education before, you know, the gaming, whereas the boys do seem to do it in reverse, and then of course afterwards have to play catch up. Yeah. And I think that's not just in esports. You find that in so many sports. I think it's basically a gender issue that females do put their studies before. And that is why you see MSSA actually does have the distinction between, you know, male and female players. Because there are these very different priorities.
Are there other gender differences? I mean, do boys and girls play different games?
Well, definitely. There's, you know, this opens a whole minefield of what, you know, everybody says, you know, esports is not gender specific. But, you know, there are a lot of differences. For example, females actually see many more shades than what males do. Most of the games that are produced tell male stories. They're programmed by males, they're designed by males. So it's a very different and difficult terrain to maneuver. I think the biggest problem is that females do have different priorities and they do play very different games. So some of the games that you find that they enjoy, a lot of males would actually scoff at. Mindsports South Africa ran a texting competition a couple of years ago in which we had 80,000 participants, and over 70% of all the participants were actually female. And they were far superior. The females were far superior than the males in texting. It's what interests you. And I think this is the important thing about the digital age, is it allows people to do things that actually interest them. That's not the hard and fast rules that we had when we were growing up, of that you had to do, you know, what was being presented to you. And I think that's where schools still have to learn how to accommodate a lot of its learners.
Possibly a question which you know, is very open-ended, but what do you feel the cognitive benefits of esports are, if any? You know, does it add to alertness? You know, the hand-eye coordination, the need to constantly strategize at a very high speed. readjust your strategy in the middle of a game? I mean, are there general cognitive benefits, do you think?
Definitely. Hand-eye coordination is definitely there. And, if you look at a game like StarCraft, it was described as playing a full game of 3-hour chess in 2 minutes. So it basically teaches people how to react very quickly to new situations. It teaches, in terms of the cognitive benefits, anything that chess does, anything that you find from any other of the mind sports in terms of improving concentration, it's all there. It's all in eSports.
Yeah. I mean, quite a lot of research has shown that, in fact, it's first-person shooter games that appear to offer, more cognitive benefits than other games, which is, I think, a bit counterintuitive to what people of our generation tend to think. But you mentioned other games as well that are offered by Mind Sports South Africa, things like checkers and war games and things like that. Are those going strong? Is there any growth in those areas?
Well, basically, it's very difficult for the older games to compete against, eSports.
Yeah.
eSports has all the bling. With eSports, all you have to do is buy the game and you're up and running. And these days, you don't even have to buy the game. A lot of the games are free. So you just have to upload it and off you go. Whereas if you're looking at games like war games in particular, you're looking at a lot of preparation, which can take months to prepare in order just to get yourself onto the field. Games like checkers and backgammon are all offered now anyway on the internet. So what you find is that people tend to go for the more exciting and sometimes more addictive games. And one of the biggest problems that we do have with eSports is age restrictions. And we find that even here we have to sometimes take educators to task where they will not be fully aware that all the eSports games actually have age restrictions and they have to be complied with.
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem, certainly that I witnessed amongst primary school kids, that they were all playing games which did have age restrictions. And then what do you do as a teacher? They're obviously playing it at home. They have accounts that you can see from their account they've spent millions of hours playing it already. How do you deal with that exactly?
Well, that's one of the things that we have is, we've come in, Mind Sports South Africa has come under a lot of criticism from some of the youngsters. Why don't you have Fortnite, for example? I've even had a mother, say to me, why won't you let my 12-year-old son play Fortnite? And they said, because the age restriction is 16.
I didn't realize it was 16. I thought, most of them are, 13?
It depends very much on the game. So if you look at, obviously, like FIFA, you're looking at an age restriction of 6. If you're looking at Clash Royale, which is a very pleasant little mobile game, you're looking at an age restriction of 13. Counter-Strike is 16. Paladins is 12. You're looking at Call of Duty, which is now 18. So it's actually very difficult. And of course, it also differs from country to country. So, if we had to choose a junior national high school team for Call of Duty, there's in fact very few Counter-Strike, with an age restriction of 16. There's very few countries against whom they could play, because a lot of the countries actually stick the age restriction for that game up to 18. So, you've got to be very careful. And, there again, it's just awareness. the teachers have to be, the educators, sorry, have to be aware, the parents have to be aware, and even the learners have to be aware. And that, so it's can teach patience if you want to follow the law, because it will teach you how to be patient. And also it will teach discipline.
Oh, absolutely, kids, you must follow the law. And you talk about discipline, and I've heard you talk before about that kind of movement between kids who are playing at home and playing on their own, and it's possibly seen as very addictive and antisocial and so on. And then the discipline that playing eSport at school offers for giving a forum for, a recognized school activity where you are taught to be a disciplined member of a team. Do you think that's important at all?
I think it's vitally important, and I think that's where it's so important that schools accept eSports, because this is a field where it is growing and people are going to do it. And schools need to be able to teach that level of discipline to their learners so that people can see that, yes, I can play this, but work comes first. My education comes first. My family comes first. You've got to teach that discipline. You've got to be able to teach a person that I'm going to play for 2 hours, whether it's practice or whether it's competition, whatever it is, and then to be able to put the game aside. They've got to be able to take control of their own futures. Otherwise, you're going to end up as so many other people have, where they just become totally addicted to the game and everything else slides, and then they wonder where their lives have gone. So, and I think it's a responsibility that starts A, at home, and it's B, it must be enforced at school level.
Yeah, so it's incumbent on us as teachers to inculcate an ethos, really, of how to play games, but to play responsibly, and to also to give meaning and discipline to one's own life.
Well, that's right. You've got to show that discipline. You've got to have meaning. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you do it the proper way, you can get your provincial colours, you can get your national colours. You can get jobs overseas, which pay pounds, which is always lovely. And
yes, I wish.
Exactly. And this is the thing, that you can have doors open. You can become a better citizen through it if you do it properly. If you don't do it properly, you can end up sitting in your mother's basement for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And playing eSports, through structures such as MSSA, gives you benefits of selection of colours and things like that, and also opens up the door to sports bursaries, does it not?
That's right, it does. I mean, we've had a number of children who've gone through. Sorry, there's just a bit of noise here at the moment.
You probably heard a lot of noise my end because it's break time.
Oh, right. Well, there is the possibility of getting bursaries. We've had a number of children who've actually got bursaries at school level, and there's a number of bursaries that have been offered to youngsters who've had Protea colours to go to university. And what better way of helping to pay for your university studies than through eSports?
Absolutely. Well, Colin, thank you so much for agreeing to be here and giving us so many valuable insights into eSports and the role it can play in the curriculum and beyond. The dedication that you have put into this, I know, is absolutely immense. So thank you so much.
No, thank you very much, Dorian. It's been a pleasure to chat to you.
If you're interested in joining MindSport South Africa and you're in South Africa, please look for MindSport South Africa on Twitter or on Facebook and consider joining one of their leagues. I think your students will find it very rewarding. I know I've entered 2 schools in the league, and both sets of students have really, really enjoyed it and benefited from it. If you enjoy these videos, please like, subscribe, share, and hit the notification bell to receive updates when new videos are released.